Thank you for visiting. I'm Stephen Walker, the Director of Middle Way Health. I'm one of the psychotherapists here. We are now open to see people in person during this unprecedented time. However, we're also available to do telehealth and video conferencing and video sessions. We'd like you to feel safe, but also open. So here at the office, we are welcoming people, and we look forward to seeing you. When I've been a patient or a client in therapy, I know that it's hard to pick a therapist. Looking on other websites or reading people's biographies is useful, but I've always wanted to be able to see them and talk to them first. It's difficult these days to get a therapist on the phone. Fortunately, we have video, and we put together a short film where the team here describes why they wanted to be a therapist, what's difficult being about a therapist, what they're looking for in therapy, and how they work. This gives you an opportunity to meet our team virtually, and hopefully we'll see you at Middle Way Health. Thank you.
To start off, can you explain your method of care and what your specialty is here?
My basic program is to try to get people to tell the truth. I think that's it. And that's hard to do because there's so many layers of defenses and protections that we've built up since childhood to keep us safe. But a lot of those defenses and those safety mechanisms don't work as adults or even as kids.
The wonderful part about being a psychiatrist is I have lots of tools, including medication, but also in talking to people. So I agree with Stephen that it's so important to get people to feel comfortable enough to actually start telling their truth, because it's hard. People have often been told for their whole life that what they actually feel and what is true for them is not okay.
So I'm a marriage family counselor trainee, and I'm working under the supervision of Stephen Walker. And I'm seeing clients here for the Middle Way Health Foundations, mostly for free.
So I really enjoy using art directives and art with my clients to explore processing emotions and actually being playful and creative to tell their story. And I like working with young adults in particular, but also teens and older adults and families.
So Stephen and I are doing a secular alcohol drug treatment group the first and third Mondays of each month, and we are still building it, but we've had good attendance and probably maybe up to 7 people recently.
I am a therapist, and I am now in training to be a biofeedback practitioner as well.
I do family of origin work. I do some Buddhist psychology, depending on the issues that they come to me with, what kind of suffering is going on in their life. I also have, over the last 15 years, become certified as a EMDR therapist, which is an eye movement desensitization and reprogramming program to deal with trauma.
I do a variety of things, anxiety and depression mostly. I do work a lot with moms from pregnancy or even just trying to conceive on up to trying to get those kids out of the house and into college. And dads. I've been seeing some more dads lately.
So what must patients do in order to be successful in therapy?
So I think the only thing that people need to come with is curiosity, the recognition that something is not going right, and they are curious about it and want some help. Like, that's it.
Yeah, interest and curiosity is the golden path. It's the golden string, I just want people to stay interested even after therapy. I just want people to be interested in their life.
The client's such an active part of the process for me. It's not like where you go to a doctor and you give them a list of symptoms and they tell you what to do about it. It's really about their process and finding what works for them, honing in with their values and their goals for their lives, and kind of cutting out the extra stuff. So I really depend on the client for that and what they bring.
So from what I understand, people do best when they feel like their therapist cares about them. but that's something that's really hard to quantify. So, how do you develop rapport with people, and how do you make them feel like you care about them?
I think, I mean, it's being present in the room, right? And motivated and authentic in your approach, and honesty too, and integrity, like just, and being yourself.
I think people can tell when they feel heard, they feel cared for. And a lot of times in their lives, when you're interacting with people, people are thinking about what they want to get out of it. And so you don't see that they care, even though they do. And so when a therapist really sits down and listens to you and tries to understand, that feels like caring. Well, it is caring.
I haven't found it very difficult to build rapport with people. They want services. I think a lot of people out there are really struggling and need somebody to talk to. And so every client's different, of course. And so I just kind of meet them where they're at.
I set the mood of the room, and most of the time it's very pleasant. So I use essential oils, and sometimes that kind of just breaks the ice where a client comes in saying, "Oh, that smells so good." And I'm thinking, "Oh, okay, here's my hook to kind of have them relax." Because most of the time people coming into therapy, and especially if they're meeting someone for the first time, it's pretty intimidating.
How do you work with patients that are resistant, and how do you know how far you should push them?
Oftentimes, if they're resistant and I'm seeing things that they don't see, I kind of try to go in another way to help them to see things, asking a lot of questions and asking for more clarification, and also posing some of my own experience to try and nudge them along.
It depends on the relationship and how much safety I feel like I can create. If it's something that they've been resisting for a long time and I feel like, okay, it's really time, then you gently push. But if you push and somebody pushes back, that's got to be their decision.
Looking at the resistance as a wall. So instead of trying to break down the wall, we're getting to know the wall, and maybe even planting flowers by the wall, like that. So really honoring the resistance, as seeing it as part of a person's defense mechanism.
That's really cool you said that. It's the flowers along the wall, because I've had art directives where people create their wall visually, or the boundary maybe, or whatever it is. What do you want to change about that? And so, and it might, and often people are adding, they might create like a wood fence or something, or they're adding nature. And so it's just kind of cool. People visually then create something where they're like, they want something that's open, but also, protective, or has like a lock, or there's a keypad, or so I don't know, the metaphor of that was really poignant.
Do you ever give up on patients, or maybe even fire them?
I have never fired someone in terms of like saying we're done. I think it's a conversation, right? That you just say, this is what I'm noticing. I'm noticing you're coming and you're not participating, that I'm not feeling that this is where you're at right now, or want to be doing this work, and that's okay.
Usually I get fired. So, like that. Although I'd rather be fired than someone just not showing up, which is probably the more common thing. People like cancel and then they just drift off. So I'm probably, like most psychotherapists, we want something we call closure.
I wouldn't call it firing, but it'd be more sort of like referring out, right? That, or like when it doesn't feel like maybe you're helping someone get where they want to go, and so helping provide other options.
What personal experiences, or maybe even traumas, do you have in your own past that have contributed to your desire to do this work?
Okay, that's a good question. I came from a family of what I think of sometimes as oysters, and in those oysters was a lot of grit, but it didn't show on the outside. We were one of those families in the 50s, I guess I have to say, that looked like the perfect family from the outside. But under the shell of each of us, there was some grit that we were just ignoring. We were feeling it, but we weren't doing anything about it. And it was more like thinking about what we could do on the outside to get rid of this painful agitation, rather than working with the grit and turning that into something that could be healing like a pearl, is the metaphor I'm wanting to use here. And I saw the suffering that went on, and as a result my brother became an alcoholic, my mother was depressed, and my parents divorced after 20 years. And I guess with that in mind, I thought, let's deal with this grit and turn it into something else in my life as a purpose.
I have a personal mission when it comes to middle way health. You know, when I first got out of the military, I went to the VA for services, and they didn't have any available for me on a weekly basis. Told me to go out in town to get my own therapy, and so I was really lucky to get a counselor who's willing to offer me sessions for only $50 a session. And so most of my mental health healing has happened not through the VA, but through private practice. And I think I don't know where I would be without her.
I've been helping probably since I was about 15 years old. I'm much older than that now, but and this has just given me great joy. I eat it, I drink it, I sleep it. I'm always thinking of what can I do next? Do I need to buy another book? Is there another modality? You know, can I take a class? I really enjoy it.
Well, my caring comes from the fact that I grew up in a family where there was a lot of alcoholism and other kinds of addictions. And I am the oldest of 4 children, and I was a natural caretaker. So one of the things that I learned early on is I like to solve everybody's problems. And although I do it professionally, I really had to do my own work first. So I didn't get into feeling over-identifying with patients and clients.
I had been under a little bit of a negative view of psychology and mental health because in my family, my father was a suicide and he'd been under psychiatric treatment when he died. So going in my youth, I had this therapists and psychologists don't know what they're doing. So it took me a lot to say, okay, I'm going to go back and do this kind of work.
Do you ever feel triggered by your patients, or does that ever come up in a session?
Another good question.
I mean, I think the reality is all human relationships trigger things in you. No, they do, right? I mean, I think a big part of the work is also just being able to come back and be in your own space and your own body and let your own feelings come up.
I don't believe that it's good for the therapist to hide behind some artificial psychological barrier, because the idea, at least in marriage and family therapy, is to always work on a relationship. And if we don't talk about boundaries and share, like when we're affected by someone else's pain or joy, then how are people going to learn boundaries?
Let's talk a little bit about compassion fatigue and burnout. Have you ever experienced that? And if you have, what did you do about it?
I have in the past. I really enjoy being able to create the space and a schedule for myself that I can take better care of myself.
I think I agree with Lindsay, like self-care is really important. I try to practice everything that I have my clients do. I make sure that I get enough sleep. I make sure that I'm caring for myself. I think that we're kind of created to care for one another, so it really isn't that draining. It's more the other aspects of life that come in that kind of create that tiredness.
I don't feel like I suffer from compassion fatigue, but I have suffered from one time in particular, what's called projective identification. And it so slapped me back in the session. I felt like, what is happening to me? And I suppose that's as close to compassion fatigue as I've come, but it isn't really that. What it is when you sit with your client and you begin to feel the symptoms, the stuckness, the presenting problem begins to feel like yours, and all of a sudden you feel a little panicky inside because you can't move with them because you feel like they feel.
I think earlier on when I began doing this work, I experienced it a lot more. I've always made sure that I've had people around me, other professionals that I could bounce those types of issues off of. And I feel like it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but I do identify oftentimes with what our patients are saying to us.
I don't experience compassion fatigue the way most people do, perhaps because I don't leave things at the office. So people say, oh, I leave things at the office so that way I don't worry about it. But I create a bigger container, so to speak. So in a sense, I'm always carrying it with me. So the weight of someone's journey gets carried in an even way. So I don't feel I ever have to block anybody out.
I do think if you see your work as just part of your life, which I have always felt like it's not like I have my work and then I have the rest of my life. My work is part of my life, and that it's pretty wonderful to get my livelihood through helping other people, which in turn helps me, and all of us are kind of helped to move forward together.
Let's talk about a time when things did not go well. What did you do about it?
Therapy really isn't defined by things going well all the time. I think most of us that are therapists know that every session is a bit of a crapshoot, and you don't know. With some clients that are actually more disturbed than others, you don't know what's going to happen. And I guess one of the times it didn't go well with me was when a client brought in a loaded gun into the session. And I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do now? She told me that the gun was because she was feeling like using it, and she thought that maybe I'd like to keep it for safekeeping. And okay, that had never happened before, so I thought, should you put the gun down and kick it across the floor? I've seen that in the movies.
It's hard because we're human too, and I make mistakes sometimes in the process. And I think that's part of it, is being able to own up to that and saying, hey, I messed up, or giving the client that voice that that we're talking about, where sometimes people don't have that anywhere else.
The cliche is that psychotherapists will abuse their position with very vulnerable people and make sexual advances on their patients. What safeguards or protections do you have in place to make sure that those boundaries aren't crossed?
Good question. Before I answer that, I want to say most of the time in movies, Hollywood movies, the therapist or doctor is always portrayed as crossing over some boundary. I can't think of a single therapy movie where people are actually doing a real session or being real therapists, because what makes the movie interesting is there's the boundary crossing. Unfortunately, the public isn't getting a good education on that. The laws and the rules are very straightforward. That's why it's necessary, though, it is necessary, though, to have like a group practice, I think, in a lot of cases, and to have a consultation group like we do here, so people can share things. I think it's more likely that people, I could be guessing, but I think it's more likely that people get bad boundaries when they're just working alone. Mm-hmm. It is important to have colleagues who will notice, like, hey, are you doing okay? Or what's with that? Or, so we have a sense of more collegial context. But there are legal remedies, and we do have to report. If someone comes to us and says, my last therapist crossed the sexual boundary or business boundary or abuse boundary, we have to let others know.
One of the things that makes Middle Way Health different is that it's a group practice. Can you tell me what it's like working in a group practice?
Ethically, we're supposed to consult with other professionals, but not everyone has that ability. It's hard when you're trying to drive somewhere on your lunch break to meet with somebody else, or just call up another therapist when you have a question. So I think it is unique that we have this standing thing here in our office with people, where I can even grab Lindsay or Stephen or Sandra during the week and say, hey, I've got this really tough case that I'm not sure how to handle and I need some feedback. And I don't think a lot of places have that. So I think it is something that makes middle way health really unique and special.
I think working in a group for mental health providers is really important. Some of the work we do can be really isolating. You know, you're only seeing clients or couples.
It's been wonderful. I started out in the community in other places, and I didn't get the feel of belonging. I didn't get the feel that that someone cared about me personally.
We genuinely like each other and care for each other here, and I think that helps us in caring for our clients and for not getting that compassion fatigue.
I'm grateful. I don't have to work hard to find clients, and that is a great thing. They show up here, and if they don't fit with one therapist, they may fit with another, or they may end up fitting with me. So that's been wonderful to me.